Beacon, a Unitarian Universalist congregation located in Summit, New Jersey, on the ancestral lands of the Lenni-Lenape Native Americans. My name is Missy Rogers. I use the pronouns she and her. I am your worship associate today and also a member of the board just recently. I am wearing a black and white top with white pants. And I don't know if it's still a thing that you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day, but I'm in under the wire. I have shoulder-length salt and pepper hair and wear glasses. We welcome you, those of you who are here in person and those of you who are joining us online. We welcome you if you're a first-time visitor. We welcome those who are returning after being away. And we welcome those of you who are here every Sunday with us. We invite any visitors who are interested in a tour of the building to meet with a member of our welcome team, either Dick or Hillary, after the service, and they'll give you a little tour and talk to you a little bit about our building here at Beacon. Due to the holiday weekend, we have given our faithful, loyal, and generous Beacon Cafe volunteers this Sunday off, so there is no coffee after the service today, but don't despair. We invite you to get together with friends new and old, go enjoy downtown Summit, go to the farmer's market, and before you do any of those things, we also invite you to have a stop and chat with a couple of people who can give you some more information about some upcoming events. We have Colleen Mannion. If you will raise your hand, she will be available to answer any and all questions you have about the resale boutique, which is happening next Saturday, September 9th. It's happening in multiple locations, down at 695 Springfield and at a couple of other locations throughout the community. Westfield, my house, being one of them. So we invite you to talk to Colleen. I'll get to you in a minute, Kathleen. If you have questions or want to talk about that. We also have Kathleen Grant here today, who is available to answer questions about the upcoming March to End Fossil Fuels that's happening on September 17th. So if you have questions, want to know more about that, please see Kathleen after the service. There's other things going on. Hopefully you receive Spark and keep up with some of the different things going on. And the last thing I want to say is next Sunday, is everyone with me? If you zoned out about the other things, come back to me now. Next Sunday, we go back to 2 services. And our 2 services, the first one is at 9:30, and the second one is at 11. Oh, you guys are so good. Thank you so much. Yes. There will be a lot going on that day. We have our backpack blessing. There'll be a free brunch downstairs after both services and a connections fair. So in addition to you talking to Colleen and Kathleen today to get more information, the Connections Fair, there will be several people talking about several different things that happen here at Beacon and give you an opportunity to learn more about things you'd like to learn more about. So, welcome. Thank you for being here. I am so thrilled to be with you today.
Don't go far. You're going to need this, though. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Emily Vargas. I am a part of the lead ministry team, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm going to invite you just to take a deep breath. Missy gave you a lot of information. Take a deep breath, all right? And place your hand, a hand or both hands on your heart, and just for a moment, feel its tender beating. Let down the armor of your heart, even if it's only for a moment, and reconnect with the one thing that maybe broke your heart this week. And into this tender beating, we hear the words of the poet.
My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Adrienne Rich.
With the kindling of this flame, we, with tender hearts, cast our lot to reconstitute the world and to live into beloved community.
Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Want to try that? Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Wanderers, worshipers, lovers of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Try that again. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times. Come, even if you have broken some promises. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. 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 All right, now that your voices have started to warm up, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 188, which is the same set of words with a different tune that's in the hymnal. And it goes like this. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Last time. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. Thank you, Vicki, for being here.
Yes.
I just also want to say thank you to our AV team, which today is Alice Bogus and Will back in the room, as you probably see him coming and going after services. Hope you say hello. My name is Misa Iwama. I'm the Director of Music Ministries, and hope that you will keep on raising your voices as we go through this morning service.
Just making sure. So throughout today's service, we will have what we're calling a call and response. We are going to be using two different books and quotes and parts of those books. One is Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperfield, and the other one is Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America. And we hope the contrast of these voices will fill this space.
3 quotes from Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. The wonder is that you could start life with nothing, end life with nothing, and lose so much in between. As a kid, you just accept different worlds with different rules, even between some houses and others. The peg at home being a place where things got put where they went. Not so at my house, where milk seemed like it had its own life to live and would sit on the counter till it turned. Mom always said she'd lose her mind if it wasn't screwed in, and she wasn't wrong. Her work ID on the badge of the her work ID badge on the back of the toilet, makeup by the kitchen sink, purse outside on a chair, shoes wherever. That was just Mom. I asked Mom one time how to fix the bed so it was covered up like you see them on TV, which she thought was dead hilarious. At the time, I thought my life couldn't get any worse. Here's some advice. Don't ever think that.
From Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Why is there so much poverty in America? I wrote this book because I needed an answer to this question. This is who we are, the richest country on earth, with more poverty than any other advanced democracy. America's poverty is not for lack of resources. We lack something else. Books about poverty tend to be books about the poor. Bearing witness, these kind of books help us understand the nature of poverty. They are vital, but they do not, and in fact cannot answer the most fundamental question, which is, why? Why all this American poverty? To understand the causes of poverty, we must look beyond the poor. Those of us living lives of privilege and plenty must examine ourselves. Are we connected to all this needless suffering? This is a book about how some lives are made small so that others may grow. And finally, ending poverty will also require that each of us, in our own way, become poverty abolitionists, unwinding ourselves from our neighbor's deprivation and refusing to live as unwitting enemies of the poor.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Menendez, pronouns she, her, and I'm a member of the chaplain team here at Beacon. As chaplains, we extend the spiritual care of our community. We define spiritual care as intentional compassion through presence and listening. Chaplains also facilitate the weekly ritual of community candle lighting. And together, we light candles of joy, sorrow, and gratitude. This morning, we light a candle of support for Terry Polachek, who will undergo a medical procedure on Tuesday. May she know that she is not alone, that her Beacon family loves her and is always here to support her. A candle of sorrow and loss for Lolita, the oldest orca in captivity, who at 57 died just months before she was to be released back into the wild. Her ashes are to be returned to her native waters, the Pacific Northwest, and specifically to the Lumi Nation. A candle of sorrow and support for all the folks living in the path of Hurricane Idalia. A candle of sorrow for the people of Jacksonville, mourning the loss of community members killed by a targeted racist attack. A candle of sorrow and righteous anger for Takia Young and her unborn fetus, killed by police in Ohio for suspected shoplifting. We send loving prayers and promise to keep fighting to stop senseless murders that go unpunished. None of us are safe until all of us are safe from police brutality. And a candle of gratitude for all workers, for union members championing, that's right, championing, no? Campaigning for championing workers' rights, and for all the folks working on the Poor People's Campaign. For this and for so much more, we invite you to come forward now to light a candle here in the sanctuary, at home, or wherever you may be.
Kathy, I think we have one more. Is my microphone on? No. I think we have one more candle, and it's one of celebration that I don't want to miss, and that is that baby Charlotte was born to Chris and Danny DiGiacomo Singh, and everyone is doing wonderfully. So we are delighted and can't wait to welcome baby Charlotte into our community.
Thank you.
We invite you forward. It's totally fine.
The next song we're going to do is from the hymnal. It's number 109. And you might want to, in the tradition of Unitarian Universalists, take a look at the lyrics before we sing it. It's a very interesting text. It's called in the hymnal, As We Come Marching. But the song is known as Bread and Roses. The phrase bread and roses was popularized by Rose Schneiderman. She was a union organizer born in Poland in 1882 who moved to New York. And what she said was that people had the right to live, not simply exist, that the worker has to have bread and roses too for a more beautiful life. The tune we're going to do today is by Mimi Baez Farinha, who is the sister of Joan Baez. And as you look at the words, you can think that this text was written more than 100 years ago. But on Labor Day weekend, we are all still marching for a more just society. The tune goes like this. As we go marching, marching, in the beauty of the day, a million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. Please join in if you feel like you want to sing these words out loud. As we go marching, marching, we battle to for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their trudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil and one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, red and roses, red and roses.
There's this thing that happens, let's say at school, where a bunch of guys are in the bathroom at the urinal laughing about some dork that made an anus of himself in gym class. You're all basically nice guys, right? You know right from wrong and would not in a million years be brutal to the poor guy's face. And then it happens. The dork was in the toilet. He comes out of the stall with this look. He heard everything. And you realize you're really not that nice of a guy. This is what I would say if I could to all the smart people of the world making dumb hillbilly jokes. We are right here in the stall. We can actually hear you.
In 1881, having published War and Peace and Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy moved to Moscow from the Russian countryside. He was 53 and a man of means, about able to employ a team of servants who ran his household. One of the first things that Tolstoy noticed about Moscow was its poverty. I knew country poverty, he wrote, but town poverty was new and incomprehensible to me. The problem haunted Tolstoy, and he went looking for an answer. He visited houses of prostitution, questioned a police officer who had arrested a beggar, and even adopted a young boy who eventually ran away. The problem wasn't work, Tolstoy learned. The poor seemed to never stop working. The problem, he ultimately decided, was himself and his fellow affluents. Tolstoy wrote, "I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, and yet assure myself and others that I am very sorry for him and wish to ease his lot by all possible means, except by getting off his back."
Good morning, Beacon.
Good morning.
My name is Alejandro Polo, and I'm a member of this community as well as the treasurer for the Board of Trustees. My pronouns are he, him. Today I'm here to tell you a little bit about my Beacon experience, as I call it. A little bit under 5 years ago, I was going through a very difficult personal time. I had basically broken, right? I had to face the fact that my life, as I knew it, changed due to my divorce. And I was feeling sad and needed some support, but I also knew that my Catholic upbringing, which I never really respected or followed, wasn't going to help me. So I walked into Beacon looking for a place to meditate and think about my life. Little that I know was that I learned for the first time about this thing called coffee hour. Which, it's sad that today we're not going to have it, but maybe we can, yeah, Catholics don't do that, right? Catholics go into mass and then go home. And you know, it was interesting to me that when I was coming in, Kathy welcomed me, and eventually there was an invite to stay for coffee, and I started talking to people, something that was difficult for me. Later on, I found out that's because I have what people call social anxiety. I had no idea. I lived with it for my entire life until 4 or 5 years ago. And that was the beginning of my time with Beacon. And what I didn't know also was that community is something that lets you grow. Community is something that lets you fight through your problems. And through the group, one of the community groups I was in, some of my friends are here for that. From that, we haven't, I have a different community group now. It's called the Board. And things like having chaplains available to talk to me and the ministers being there to guide me, I found a spiritual practice, which I never had before, which was one of the key items that took me out of my hole. I hit bottom, as people say. Thank you to Beacon, thank you to this community. I was able to get there, doing work with the social justice teams and now with the board. And I'm glad that I found this place. And I hope all the people have the opportunity to walk their path and overcome their problems like I did by keeping Beacon available for everybody. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but between the song and the testimonials, my heart, thank you, Alejandro. Beacon's mission of radical inclusion is really about growing people and being there for one another, from the first greeting to a chaplain who reaches out to a community group who supports us and cheers us on. That is our mission. And to this mission, we give this day. The morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world alone. There is no sickness, toil, nor danger in that fair land to which I go. I'm going home to see my family. I'm going home, no more to roam. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I know dark clouds will gather around me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie just before me, where weary eyes no more will weep. I'm going home to see my family. I'm going home, no more to roam. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home.
I made my peace with that place, the city, but never went a day without feeling around for things that weren't there. I don't just mean cows or apple trees, it runs deeper. Weather, for instance. Air, the way it smells from having live things breathing into it. Grass and trees and I don't know what, creatures of the soil. Sounds I missed most of all. There was noise, but nothing behind it. I couldn't get used to the blankness where there should have been bird gossip morning and evening, crickets at night, the buzzsaw of cicadas in August. It's like the movie background music. Notice it or don't, but if the volume goes out, the movie has no heart.
Behind every great blow dealt to the scourge of poverty, there have been ordinary Americans who have bound themselves to one another to accomplish extraordinary things. Social movements spark ideas, make sure that the rights on paper become rights in practice, and most importantly, they apply the heat. How was President Johnson able to break through congressional gridlock to deliver on the Civil Rights Act, the Great Society, and the war on poverty? The civil rights movement forced his hand by putting unrelenting pressure on lawmakers. Johnson admitted as much in 1965, telling Congress that the actions of Black Americans called upon us to make good the promise of America. And who among us can say that we would have made the same progress were it not for their persistent bravery and their faith in American democracy? Poverty will be abolished in America only when a mass movement demands it so. Here ends our reading. Listening to the reading from Demon Copperhead, I keep wanting to say Copperfield. It's written everywhere. I thought I got it right. It's in my head, though. It's going to be one of those little warbles that stays in my head. But listening to him talk about that hillbilly accent reminded me that when I was 7 years old, I lost my thick Eastern Kentucky accent in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I know. 6 weeks. My parents and I had just moved to Pennsylvania, which I have to say, and I get this, from New Jersey might seem a lot like Kentucky. But friends, my family was now in spitting distance away from two major cities, Philadelphia and New York City. So I must have quickly intuited that my Southern accent made me different, and so therefore learned to say the word fat as one syllable and not two. Fayette was how I said fat. Fayette. He is Fayette. You're laughing, but that could be how you say fat, and there's nothing wrong with that. My English husband, on the other hand, has lived in America for more than 20 years. His English accent is fully intact. Over the years, I've noticed how readily and positively Americans respond to his English accent, how many assumptions are made about a person's education and status and authority on that simple accent, and how those assumptions, often unconscious, determine how a person will be treated. People say to me, "Your husband can call me anytime." Really? So about a year after I started working at Beacon, we engaged an organization. It still is called Beyond Diversity Resource Center. And we engaged them to lead a group of us in dialogue circles around race. Different from the ones that we do now. And by the way, the registration for dialogue circles on race 1 and 2 is September 5th. Your service announcement is done. This was a little bit different, but it was the launch of something like that, what we're engaged in now. Robin and Pamela, the facilitators, led us in this exercise that we had to do. And we gathered in a circle with one inner circle and the other outer circle. We were in pairs facing one another, and after each sharing, the circle would move so that we ended up listening and talking to different people around that circle. Are you with me? You got it enough? All right. Basically, we talked to a lot of different people, and we had to move quickly. Pamela, the facilitator, would prompt us saying the name of an identity, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, and the talker in the pair had to say the words that immediately popped into our heads, the words that we immediately associated with that identity marker. For example, if Pamela said Southerner, I would think of my immediate associations with that word without pausing and without editing. Bow ties, grits, patriarchy, slavery, uneducated, Christian. Not all true, some hard to admit, but messages that are rooted in that person's unconscious, and the other person listened and observed. We had been through several rounds of speaking and listening when it was my turn to speak, and Pamela said, Mexican, and I was silent. I could not repeat the first 15 words that were in my head. That's kind of my inner response to that. I have to say, that's very well-founded. Thank you. I stood in silence, my partner waiting, And I'm a rule-bound girl, right? So Pamela was saying, don't pause, just say it. And I was horrified at the words that kept rising to the surface until I finally found one that I was willing to say out loud, which was hardworking. Until Pamela said the word, I had no idea that these associations were in my head. And at first, I was completely overcome by shame. And it's hard for me to admit it now to you all. Robin and Pamela helped us, that group, shift from shame to curiosity. What did these associations, both positive and negative, teach us about our regard for our fellow human siblings? How, like the difference between a Southern and an English accent, did these associations affect how we actually treated people, both interpersonally, one-on-one, but also in the systems that we put in place? And it was a powerful lesson for me. And so on this holiday weekend, Labor Day, which both honors and celebrates the American worker, that exercise has returned to me, making me wonder how many of us would respond, or how we would respond if Pamela were to lead that exercise in this room today and say the words, working poor. This week, we learned that Samuel Joseph Wurzelbacher died from pancreatic cancer. Does anybody remember or know what Samuel Joseph Wurzelbacher was famous for? That's right, Bill. Who was he?
Joe the plumber.
Joe the plumber. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Some people are yes, some people are no. So back in 2008, there was a famous exchange between Barack Obama, bless you, and Joe the plumber. Remember, 2008 was a hard year economically for America. Joe met the then presidential candidate in Toledo, Ohio, on the campaign trail, and he had one question: how would Obama's administration help hardworking Americans? After all, he was a plumber who worked 10 to 12 hours a day. How would Barack Obama help the American worker gain access, better access to the American dream of prosperity? Joe the plumber, as he became named, became an instant stand-in for working class Americans terrified over the state of the economy and the financial crisis. And what he was alluding to, talking about, was that no matter how hard he worked, 10 to 12 hours, Joe's access to the American dream, to that prosperity, was fleeting, which was a very different story from his grandfather's story. What was happening in America in the 21st century that this working class white man could not prosper? Joe the plumber was not a member of the working poor, but Julio Paez, a permanent resident in the U.S., was. He lived at that time in a one-bedroom apartment with his mother and two siblings. Like Joe the plumber, he worked long days, even longer, in Emeryville, California, working not one, but two full-time jobs at 80 hours a week. He worked 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at a temp agency, and then from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at McDonald's. Each job paid minimum wage. This was not sustainable. And so there's something going on this morning, y'all. He had 2 wake-up calls. That's my next line. That is seriously my next line. Thank you. Now everybody's just gonna be waiting for the next one. So Julio had 2 wake-up calls. First, his younger brother, Alexander, who said to him, "How much do I have to pay you for you to spend an hour with me?" Because he knew that his brother needed to make every cent that he could, but he wanted time with his older brother. And so he asked, "How much do I have to pay?" And the question made Julio weep. The second was when Julio fainted from exhaustion in a grocery store aisle. He realized that there was no amount of working that would give him the pathway to the American dream, and that working alone was killing him. Joe the plumber, a white man, had a voice that Julio did not. His question, followed that same year by the nomination of Sarah Palin for vice president, would give rise to the birth of the Tea Party movement, many of whom would run for local, state, and federal government in the 2010 midterm elections, and many of whom are now involved in former President Trump's MAGA movement. There is a line there, right? And both of them, both Joe and Julio, are asking what's gone wrong for the American worker. It's a question that Matthew Desmond undertakes in his book, Poverty by America. And he writes, between the late 1940s and the late 1970s, the American economy expanded and shared its bounty. It was, quote, the most economically equitable period in our history. Joe the plumber's grandfather could work hard, receive a solid paycheck and benefits, and gain access to the American dream. Sociologist Gerald Davis has said, our grandparents had careers, our parents had jobs, we complete tasks, especially if you are the working class or working poor. Why? One big reason we are here on Labor Day was union power. In the 1950s and 60s, nearly a third of all US workers carried union cards, a third of US workers, and they fought like hell for the right to a fair wage and fair treatment. In 1970 alone, writes Desmond, 2.4 million union members participated in work stoppages, wildcat strikes, and tense standoffs with company heads. What changed? A couple of factors, but ones that we are familiar with. First, racism. The promise to white workers rooted in the American soil long before the American Revolution that they were better than black workers who were then slaves rooted itself into the unions. And it was there so that people wouldn't organize together, right? This rainbow coalition. And instead of realizing that full potential with that rainbow coalition, organized unions were hostile to black workers at that time, both men and women. The second factor was stagflation, the stagflation of the 1970s as the American economy slowed. Political adversaries took advantage of this moment. They seized it, and they began to blame the unions for the economic slowdown. If we weren't paying our workers this much, the economy would be taking off. And that message has continued. Organized labor is a drag on the economy. American workers were promised that if we got rid of the unions, our economy would take off. And once free from the restrictions, everyone would benefit. So unions became a dirty word. It's been interesting to me, even as I read this book, to watch within myself the way different words that he uses, like unions, pop up and how I'll either have resistance or I'll be cheering. And it's important, as Pamela and Robin taught me, to notice the internal dialogue that happens when words like union pop up. So Matthew Desmond says, and yet, since 1979, the bottom 90% of income earners, 90%, writes Matthew Desmond, not the bottom 10, 20, or even 50%, but the bottom 90% saw actual earning gains of only 24%, while the wages of the top 1% of earners more than doubled. In their book, Radical Markets, Eric Posner and Glenn Weil write, we were promised economic dynamism in exchange for inequality. We got inequality, but dynamism is actually declining. Many other countries haven't experienced the income inequality that the US has experienced, and Desmond asks why. He asks why a lot in this book. Their workers have been able to keep their unions, meaning workers in those countries have the power to advocate for their needs. So y'all, if Julio had worked for McDonald's, the same fast food company, in Denmark, he would have earned double what he earns in America, or what he earned at that time in America. So when Joe asked his question in Toledo, he was pointing to a deeper question for the American worker. How will the government of our country make the economy work for workers? Is this the capitalism we want? where 1% not only prosper, but fly themselves to the moon, while 90% are exploited. Matthew Desmond cites the novel There by Tommy Orange, where one character says, "Kids are jumping out of burning buildings, falling to their deaths, and we think the problem is that they're jumping." Are you with me? Can you imagine that they're jumping? So we have to reframe our perspective, look away from the people jumping and say, why are buildings burning? And how can we prevent these fire? And we actually need to care about the people who are jumping. Who are these people? And are we in relationship with them? In 2015, the mayor of Emeryville, California, where Julio lived, wondered if they could mandate a real living wage as a local government. The fight for $15 was born, and Julio became a part of the movement. He was super nervous about that first strike, but when he arrived on the streets in his McDonald's uniform, he saw thousands of other workers in theirs, a rainbow coalition. By 2019, Emeryville, California had raised their minimum wage to $16 an hour. By 2022, it was $17.68, the highest in the nation. It had a significant effect on Julio's life. He was still working 2 jobs, but not 2 full-time jobs, and he was sleeping a full 6 to 7 hours every night, taking more walks and spending time with his family, especially his brother, Alexander. Matthew Desmond asks, what is going on in the American psyche that causes us to accept the state of being for the American worker, specifically for those of the working poor, drilling down even further to the growing numbers of people who are living in poverty? What unconscious assumption prevent us from seeing what is before us? And then, y'all, he just turns, as you might have heard in the reading, and he asks one question, one piercing question. Who benefits from exploiting the American worker? Who benefits from exploiting? Writing, people benefit from poverty in all kinds of ways. It's the plainest social fact there is. And yet, when you put it like this, the air becomes charged. You feel rude bringing it up. People shift in their chairs, and some respond by trying to quiet you the way parents try to shush small children in public when their children point out something that everyone sees but pretends not to, or the way serious adults shush young people when they offer blanket critiques of capitalism that, with the brutal clarity of a brick through a window, express a deep moral truth. People accuse you of inciting class warfare when you're merely pointing out the obvious. Nevertheless, even with this tension throughout the book, he continues to ask that question: who benefits? Who benefits? Who benefits? And as he said, we as readers shift in our chairs, and then he'll ask it again, and each time showing us who benefits and how. And the reader, of course, responds with, of course, but no, in the same breath. We shout, it's more complicated than that, Matthew. And he says, as he has persisted, even the liberals will call him a Marxist. As a seven-year-old, I intuited that I could be the smartest person in the room, the smartest, and people would think otherwise when I spoke. That all of their unconscious associations would cause them to treat me differently, to treat me as if I were dumb because I said Fayette instead of fat. I didn't want my unconscious assumptions to do the same. And after I became aware of those unconscious assumptions and biases from Pamela's exercises, I realized that I had no real relationships with anyone who was Mexican, with Mexican history and heritage, language, and identity. And that had to change. Once exposed, my promise, a promise that I had made as a faithful person, to treat each and every human being with inherent worth and dignity, called me to change, to see who was most affected by the systems where I benefited, to learn, to grow, and to build real relationships outside of my bubble. So on Labor Day every year, we are called not only to celebrate the end of the summer, but we are called to deepen our relationship with American workers, especially the working poor, for their lives show us the reality of our systems. Beloved, the questions before us, what associations lie deep in our unconscious, but always right there at the surface? What aren't we willing to face? And how are we called to root ourselves deeper in relationship with those who are affected by our systems? So this Labor Day, I give you a practice. I invite you to read Poverty by America. Begin by asking, who benefits? And is this the capitalism we want? And is this what we deserve? Let us live into these questions, remembering the promises that we are making to all of our workers. May it be so. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Thank you, Emily. I think we're all glad to hear you speak.
Thank you.
I invite you to stand in body or spirit and join in our closing song, which is 1, 2, 3, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Misa. Thank you, Vicki. I invite you to stay standing as you are able and to once again feel your heart, your tender heart beating. Once again, remember, reconnect with all that breaks your heart. And then reach out. Reach out. Do it to one another. If you're at home, reach out to someone there, the computer screen, if anything, to a window. Remembering the words of Adrian Rich that we began this service with. Let it be our mission. Our hearts are moved by all that we cannot save. So much has been destroyed, and yet we cast our lot with those people in this sanctuary, decade after decade, before and after, who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Beloved, reach out this week, and let us reconstitute the world. Amen.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle